This is our one of our webinars this autumn and winter on the global topic. So we've been doing a few different webinars that are all about food and biodiversity and how those things are connected. So if you missed any of our other ones on food waste or on our food, our health, our planet, which was with Green Earth Organics, so it was all about organic farming, and it was really interesting one with Kenneth from Green Earth Organics. You can watch those back on our YouTube channel, and I'll put a link to that in the chat at the end. And the food waste webinar was a really nice one as well. So we had Brianne from Food Cloud Ireland, and we also had some students from Carrysworth National School who had done a little bit of project work on food waste. So these are all kind of webinars to give you guys some ideas about how food and biodiversity is connected. And if your school is working on our food and biodiversity theme, hopefully it will give you some ideas for taking part in some project work on that. So as I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded, but it will just feature myself basically. If you can keep your microphone on mute, that would be great. And do use the chat box to ask and answer any questions that you have. So today's webinar is on disappearing seeds, and it's basically all about the different types of food that is grown around the world and how that has started to shrink over the last 100 years or so. So before we get really into it, we'll just describe exactly what we're talking about. So we'll just define a couple of things. So we'll start off by defining exactly what a seed is. So, you probably think to yourself, you know exactly what a seed is, you see them all the time, but just to exactly define it. So almost all plants grow from seeds. I almost said all plants do, but there's a few that don't. So things like moss and ferns don't grow from seeds. They're a bit more like fungi or mushrooms, so they grow from spores. But pretty much everything else that is a plant grows from seed. So that's including, all the foods that we eat, like fruits and vegetables, whatever they grow on began life as a seed. Flowers, grasses, shrubs, trees, no matter how big or tall or wide they are or old they are, they all started life as a tiny seed. But where do seeds come from? Obviously, we can buy them in a packet in the shop, but nature doesn't need that. So seeds, they grow inside a flower. Generally, the plant produces a flower, and seeds are only made after pollination happens. So you're probably all familiar with pollination, but what happens is pollen from a male flower gets moved to the female flower, and when they join together, the seed begins to grow. So in Ireland, pollination usually happens with the help of bees and other flying insects. It can also happen by the wind, so the wind might just blow some pollen from one flower to another. And then in other countries around the world, there's other animals that do it, like small birds, like hummingbirds. In some countries, there's even some bats that are responsible for pollination. But like I said, we kind of rely on especially bumblebees here in Ireland. So once the seed begins to grow in a flower, the next thing that it does is it has to get away from that plant, because it needs to find its own space to grow. And for it to move away from the plant, it needs a bit of help. So generally, a seed ends up being surrounded either by a fruit or some other kind of case. So if you think about, for example, let's say a blackberry, the seeds are on the inside of the fruit, and the blackberry fruit grows around it as a way to help the seeds to move. So what is going to help a blackberry move are animals. So animals like, let's say, a bird comes along and eats the blackberry, and then the seeds come out all the way in the other end in its poo, so wherever the blackberry moves, does its business, the seed drops out there and can begin to grow. So generally whatever surrounds a seed is there to help it get away. So it's not always in a fruit. If you think of a helicopter seed, so that grow in a sycamore or a maple tree, there's a tiny flat seed, but it's surrounded by almost like a wing, and this is to be help it to be moved by the wind, so it can blow quite far away from the tree. So seeds are generally in something, and but they can all look quite different. So if anyone can think of any different kinds of seeds, can pop it in the chat box now. It doesn't have to be something that we can eat, but obviously there are seeds that we can eat, and there are seeds that are inside of things that we can eat. There are seeds that animals eat, and then there's some that are totally inedible altogether. But there's so many different kinds. So if anyone can think of the names of any different kind of seeds, you can pop them in the chat now, and then I'll show you a few different examples. But the list is kind of endless. So I will jump onto the next page and we'll see some different kinds. So there's tons of different seeds, as I said. So inside lots of the fruits that you eat, there is generally seeds in the center. Sunflower seeds, yeah, it's definitely a good example. So you can see picture in the middle here, got kiwi, lemons, oranges, limes. So many of these have seeds in the center. As I said, then the fruit grows around them to help them to move. Things like sunflower seeds, they grow in the middle of a flower and they can be eaten by us. Loads of great answers here as well coming in. So acorns, watermelon, apple, pumpkin, trees, lemons, oranges, banana, brilliant. So yeah, those are all great examples. So as I said, some we can eat and some we can't. So the acorn is a good example of one we can't, but animals do eat those and they help them to move. Here in the bottom middle, got dandelion seeds. So these are moved by the wind. On the left here, we've got seeds inside pine cones. So the seeds are actually tiny. They're inside that cone. So you can see when it opens up here, the seeds can kind of fall out or get moved again. The whole pine cone is often moved by an animal to give the seeds a new chance to move. So these are all the different kinds, or just some of the different kinds of seeds that we have. They all have kind of slightly different life cycles, etc. So next thing we're going to talk about is biodiversity. Oh, went the wrong way. So biodiversity, again, you're probably all very familiar. It means all of the different kinds of living things. So this includes things on many different levels. So first of all, any living thing, we're talking about animals, plants, tiny things like bacteria, viruses, fungi. So it's anything that is alive is part of biodiversity. And you can look at biodiversity in a few different ways. So it can be just all the different types of species. So you could go, okay, well, butterfly, blackbird, robin, carrots. These are all different kinds of species. They're all different kinds of biodiversity. But you could also look at biodiversity as on a bigger scale, like the different types of habitats where these things live. So forest habitat, a desert, river, coastline, and these are all different kinds of biodiversity as well. And then lastly, there's the differences between species. So, I said butterfly earlier, but there's tons of different kinds of butterfly, and there's tons of different kinds of carrots. So there's lots of different types of species, and even think of differences within people. So, humans, we're one species of animal. We don't really think ourselves animals, but we are. And within, if you look at your friends, we all have different personalities, we have different heights, different color eyes, hair, etc., etc. So there's differences within species as well as outside of them. And in general, the more differences we have, the better. It's better for the planet when we have lots of different types of habitats, and then when there's lots of different types of animals and plants living in them. And then it's also better when there's lots of differences between those animals and plants. So it makes the planet stronger, keeps everything in balance. It's a bit like a spider web. If you think of all of these different strands of the spider web, they add to the strength overall. So if one of these strands breaks or disappears, it's not all going to fall apart because there are so many there. So the more diversity we have, the better. And this applies as well to the foods that we eat. So if you think of the seeds that are planted to give us food, we want to have a lot of diversity there. And there's a huge number of crops that we can eat. So there is more than 6,000 different species of plants that have been grown for people to eat, which is a lot. I don't know how many types of food you guys have ever eaten, but for me, it's definitely less than 6,000. So this is, varies all around the world. These are things that have been intentionally grown by farmers or growers to feed themselves or others. But even though there is that many options for us, we actually only eat a tiny amount of these, and very few are actually grown. And sorry, I keep going the wrong way. So if we look at what everyone around the world eats altogether, 60% of what is eaten is coming from just 3 different types of food. So those 3 types are rice, wheat, and corn. So it's kind of crazy to think there's so many different types of food out there, but a lot of people are getting most of their daily diet, most of their calories from either rice, wheat, or corn. In some countries, this is different. So this is just overall on planet Earth. In different countries, there's some foods that are eaten more often than others, but this is just the overall amount. So because there's such an importance being put on these 3 types of crops, obviously a lot of space is given to grow them. That means it's really important that there's differences within them. So if you take rice, for example, there is actually 120,000 different types of rice that could be grown there. So they're all just slightly different from each other, but there are differences there. And even though there's so many different types, again, it's mostly the same few types that are being grown, and we'll talk a bit more about that. So this is just to show you how the number of different types of seeds has gone down in recent years, or so basically in the last 100 years. So along the top here, these are the amount of different types of seeds that you could buy if you were a farmer or you wanted to grow crops. And this is what the amount of different types of lettuce you could buy. In 1903, there was just under 500 different types of lettuce. So if you were deciding, okay, what am I going to plant this year? You had 500 different choices in terms of what kind of lettuce you wanted to grow. And they might all taste a bit different, and they might be slightly different colors. Some of them might grow well if it's really hot out. Some of them might grow really well if it's rains a lot. Some of them might be able to survive if a certain kind of disease comes along. So they would all be slightly different to one another. So back 130 or 40 years ago, there was 500 different types that could be grown. But then if we go down to now, there is just under 40 different types. So it's really shrunk. So what has happened to, this 350 other kinds of lettuce? They're just not available anymore. So it's like they've gone extinct. And it's the same pattern across, pretty much all of these different types of food, from tomatoes, cucumbers, squash. They've all gone down from having hundreds of different types that you could buy to go out and plant to, between 10 and 50. So there's a lot fewer options out there now, whereas we might think it's the opposite, that as we go on and we learn more and that we're able to produce more different kinds of food, we're actually going the opposite way. So here's just a little quick quiz for you. These are some more unusual types of vegetables that you might not see very often in the shop. Any ideas what this is that I'm showing you here? If you think you know, you can put your answer into the chat. So I would say almost all of you have eaten a different type of, a different color of this kind of vegetable. You probably haven't eaten a purple one, but I'd say you've all had one of its cousins recently. It's not a beetroot, good guess. So I'll give you a clue that the one that we eat a lot is not purple. Oh, much closer, sweet potato. You're almost right. This is actually a type of potato. And obviously we aren't used to seeing purple potatoes, but this would have been quite common a long time ago. You would have lots of different colors available. But nowadays we don't really see those. Dragon fruit's a really good guess. But no, it's a purple potato. There's some places you can still buy these, some farmers markets in Ireland, but they're pretty rare. You can definitely still grow them. You can find seeds, or not seeds, but yeah, you can find potatoes that you can grow, which are this color. I'll give you another one now. So this time my question is, how many different vegetables do you think are in this picture? So hopefully you can all see that okay. So this is again a bit of a tricky one. But how many different types there are, and if you think you know what kind, you can put that in as well. So one, we have Mrs. McKeown's class saying that there is only one type of vegetable there. So you guys are right. There is only one. So these are all different kinds of carrots. So again, we're generally used to seeing this orange type of carrot. This is the most popular in the shops. But these are all other varieties of carrot as well. So this one here looks a lot like a parsnip, but they are carrots, just again in different colors. And they will all taste a little bit different. And you know, they might grow differently. So the carrots is something that's quite popular for us to grow. I know a lot of schools grow it, and yeah, you can buy different types of seeds that have different colored carrots in them, and yeah, you might be able to taste a bit of a difference when you have them. And then my last question for you on seeds or on different types of vegetables. This is quite a hard one. Does anyone know what this vegetable is? This is one you might not have tried before. And it's a vegetable that is grown in Ireland, and you can get them from some farmers markets. And I mentioned we had a webinar a couple of weeks ago with Kenneth from Green Earth Organic. So he has a farm in County Sligo, no, maybe Galway, I think Galway or Sligo, and they grow this vegetable there. It looks a little bit like space agey to me, I think. I don't know why I associate it, but it reminds me of space or aliens or something like that. But yeah, it's part of a family of vegetables that again you might eat a lot. It's often its cousins are much more common. No guesses coming in for this one. It is a hard one. This is called Romanesco, and Romanesco is in the same family as cauliflower and broccoli. Quite a nice taste, but it's something that we don't really see very often. But you do see lots of cauliflower and broccoli. So same family, but not eaten as much at all. So why has this happened? Why are we growing much less crops than we did 100 years ago? So the biggest reason is probably that farmers started growing the types of seeds which produce the most food. So if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense. If there's hundreds of different types of wheat you can choose from, or broccoli or whatever it is, you want to plant the seed that you think, oh, that's going to grow the biggest amount of food that I can sell or that I can eat. So that started being the priority for a lot of growers, is picking the one that is going to give them the most that they can sell. So the seeds are all the same size going into the ground, but what comes out of the soil is different, or under the soil. So there was a big focus on which seeds produce the most. And as we started to be able to, travel around the world and buy things from abroad, we're able to learn, what's working well in this country or over there. So whereas a long time ago, people would be growing seeds that were local to them, what grew the best in the type of soil that they had, or what grew best in the type of weather that they had in their country. And they started to move to, okay, well, let's grow this type of seed that we know produces the biggest types of corn, or the biggest amount of wheat, or whatever it is. And then there was another big reason, was the impact of seed companies. So there's a few really big companies that own a lot of different types of seeds, and they would try and encourage farmers and growers to grow a particular type of seed that produces, like I said, a lot of food, and which will result in the same type of vegetable that looks the same as each other, and that people get comfortable eating. So if you think back to our purple potatoes and our our white carrots and all those different colors, that's just one difference in how they can look. There's also the shape and the texture of different vegetables that oftentimes, if someone would to go into the shop and see a carrot that was all twisted around and it wasn't a normal shape, or if there was a banana that was at a funny angle, or it had an apple with something growing out of it, people mightn't want to eat that. So what people started to grow were foods that grew the exact same way, the same color every single year, so that when people go to buy them, they're happy and go, oh, this looks the same as what I bought last week, I'm going to buy it again this week. So those are probably the biggest reasons why the same types of seeds are being grown all around the world, as opposed to lots of different types. So what's the problem with this? So there's a few different problems about losing all of those different varieties of crops and seeds. So one is they're a bit more vulnerable. So I said at the beginning with biodiversity that the more different types of things there are, the stronger the overall kind of strength of the habitat is. And this is because if you imagine, for example, a really good example is the potato famine in Ireland, where there was just row after row after row of potatoes being grown. And when a disease arrived, it's really easy for it to move from one row of potatoes to the next, to the next, to the next, because there's nothing in between them to stop it from moving. Whereas if you had one row of potatoes or one field of potatoes, and then in the next field there was a field of corn or a field of wheat or a field of broccoli, that disease wouldn't be able to jump across. So it makes it really easy for diseases to spread when all of the same types of things being grown. It also means that they can be vulnerable to weather. So especially at the moment when our weather is a bit is changing very quickly, and you probably notice, we've had lots of rain in the last few months. It's been warmer into September and October before, so things are changing quite quickly. Every year the weather can be different to the year before. So in the past, let's say if you had 5 different types of crop growing, and one of them might do really well if it's really hot in the summer, whereas if you're growing one type and it doesn't do well when it's hot, then all of a sudden, if that happens, you have nothing left, because they all react the same way to the weather. Whereas if you have lots of different types and there's bad weather, there's lots of storms or whatever it is that year, hopefully some of them will be able to survive even though others don't. So that's what I kind of mean by resilience, and that they're able to react in different ways. It also means there's less variety in people's diets. So we're not eating as many different types of things. So this might not be true in places like Ireland, but in other countries where there's only a small amount of particular types of food being produced, they have less things to choose from. And when, like I said, there's 6,000 different just types of plant crops available to grow, not even including meat, If you think of all of the different kinds of vitamins and minerals that might be in those different things, that might not be in just the few small amounts that people are eating. And it can be less interesting as well. So people might enjoy getting to have a purple potato instead of the same color every night. And then there's also the impact it has on other biodiversity. So there's lots of different insects, birds, and mammals even that might go and live in the fields where these things are growing. They might rely on them for pollen or for nectar or for spaces, for shelter, etc. And again, when it's all just one type, you're not going to have as much biodiversity supported in them. And it can also mean for the farmers or for the growers, they have less choice. They become reliant. They can become reliant on the seed companies, and a lot of times, some of these types of seeds that are being sold, the company will say, "Oh, these work best. They grow best when you add this type of fertilizer to them or this type of pesticides," and these can cost much more money. So if the farmer or the grower is growing a certain type of seed, all of a sudden they'll have to buy more things to help them to grow really well. And they become used to adding those things to the soil. The soil needs more and more of them and becomes more expensive. And as well for the soil itself, it's better for the soil if there's lots of different things going into it. And when the same thing is planted throughout the soil, it's taking out the same amount of nutrients and everything from it. And whereas when there's different things in the soil, they all react differently, and it becomes a bit healthier. So what are the things farmers and growers have to worry about when they are deciding what seeds to plant? So obviously they all want to have the best harvest they can. They don't want their crops to be damaged. They're putting in a lot of work, a lot of effort into growing them. So there's loads of things they have to worry about and look out for. So there's many different types of insects that might eat them. Other things like weeds or unwanted plants growing around them, kind of competing with them. And then there's all of the different kinds of diseases, which could be from bacteria, fungi, or viruses that can damage the crops. And depending on what kind of crops are being grown and how they're being grown, there are different types of risks. So if someone is growing potatoes, there's different things to worry about than if they're growing wheat, because they don't have the same kinds of diseases. There's not the same types of insects that want to eat them and so on. So there's lots of different things for farmers to think about. I'm going to give you guys an idea of that in our little game at the end. So one thing that some farmers can do to try and stop some of the dangers happening is using pesticides. So pesticides are generally a chemical that can be sprayed onto crops to either kill the insects that eat them and the other weeds that go around them. Those are the two most common things that pesticides are trying to do, is to prevent damage by insects and disease. So farmers that don't use pesticides or fertilizers are called organic farmers, and they're ones that avoid using those, and they have to use other methods of trying to keep the disease and insects and weeds away. So even though it's really helpful for farmers to remove insects that are eating their crops and weeds, and by using pesticides, there are some negative effects of them. So most of the pesticides don't just land on the crop or target the thing that they're trying to stop. So a lot of it ends up going into the soil, into the water, landing on other positive insects. So they can affect the bees that are pollinating them that the farmers aren't trying to stop, and they can get into the food chain. And they're also, as I said, expensive for farmers to buy and to use. Another really negative thing about them is that they can result in superbugs. So these are like the pests that aren't killed by the pesticide, they're the only ones that are left. So they're the really strong ones that survive. And then because only the really strong ones survive, what happens is they end up reproducing and making more and more and more of those strong superbugs. And then all of a sudden the farmer has to buy more pesticide and that's more expensive to try and kill off the pests, or buy a stronger pesticide that might be more harmful to the soil and to the water. So it can be a bit of a chain reaction. And then the other problem, especially in low and middle income countries, so in countries that don't have as much money, as much income as we do in Ireland and Europe, there is often fewer rules and laws about what kind of pesticides can be used. So some of the strongest and most dangerous pesticides are not allowed to be used in Ireland and in Europe and in North America. But in other countries, there is fewer laws about them, and they have still been are still being used. And these can actually be really dangerous for the people using them. And it's usually the women and children who are in charge of using the pesticides. So they're the most likely to be at risk of them. And lots of people are actually killed by either accidents from pesticides, or they might knock over a large amount of them. Different types of accidents can cause the deaths of a large amount of people around the world each year. So in many other countries, it is much more dangerous than it is here in Ireland. But that is where a lot of our food is coming from, and so it is something to think about. So now on to what are we doing about all of these seeds that we're not growing anymore. So one thing that people are doing is they are saving the seeds that have been grown in the past and are only being grown in a small amount now. So this place is called seed banks or seed libraries, which basically it's like a library for seeds or a bank for seeds. So a small amount of seeds from different types of plants are stored there. So they're kept in these places so that people can go and take them out, grow plants with those seeds, and then give back the types of seeds that they had into the bank or into the library. And these exist in really large places and also on a really small scale. So there are some small communities, libraries, even schools that have their own seed banks or libraries where they might just have, 100 different types of seeds there. Then also almost every country in the world has their own seed bank where they might have thousands of different kinds of seeds there, which are all things that are grown in their country. And even if they're not being grown anymore, they keep like a certain type, a few types of each seed, so that if we do want to grow them again in the future, that they are there. So this is something that we have all around the world. But I'm also going to show you just a short video of the biggest seed bank in the world. And it has hundreds of thousands of seeds from all of the other seed banks around the world. So all of the countries have kind of sent their seeds to this one place kind of for safekeeping. And it's basically almost buried under a mountain. So it's in a really safe place. So I won't say any more about it. We'll have a watch of the video and see what you guys think.
The Seed Vault is a facility in Svalbard, closer to the North Pole and the Arctic Circle. And it's built inside of a mountain. It's a facility where we're storing duplicate copy of most of the crop diversity in the world. A lot of people are excited about the Seed Vault, and they think of it as the insurance policy in case of doomsday or whatever, but that's not it. It's not the building, it's not the tunnel, it's not the Seed Vault. It's the seeds, it's the diversity inside the Seed Vault that's the real insurance. Sometimes people say, why do you need all this diversity? Can't you just save the best variety? cabbage or rice. People don't realize there's a huge turnover of varieties in the field. And so you may think that the loaf of bread that you're eating today tastes just the same as it did 10 years ago and is made with the same varieties of wheat or whatever as it was 10 years ago. I can assure you that's not the case. Diversity ensures us against everything we know is coming and everything we don't know. Primarily, right now, that's climate change. We're going to have that diversity to adapt to climate change. We're going to actually need our crops to be both heat resistant and drought tolerant. In the future, we'll see the extremely hot days today become the mild days of tomorrow. And we know what happens in extremely hot days today, it's production failures. So farmers are going to have to adjust to that.
Okay, so it's quite a cool idea, I think, that there is so much variety of seeds being kept in this one place near the North Pole. So it's if you want to learn more about that, I'll put a link at the end. You can actually do a virtual tour of the seed vault and see a bit inside. So as it said, they have seeds from almost every country on the planet, so it adds up to quite a lot of them. And you know, farmers can ask to check out the seeds, plant some of them, and see how they work. So it's pretty cool to think about. Okay, so we're going to finish off by doing a little game. So this is just to show you how hard it can be to plan and what kind of seeds you would like to plant. So I'm going to give you guys a few choices. So this is where I'm going to ask you to get your pens or pencils ready. So I want you to think about this. So you've got a farm and you've got €1,000 to spend. And where you're going to decide what you're going to spend things on. And after you've made your decisions, I'm going to tell you what might have happened this year and how your decisions might have worked out. So we'll do this step by step. I'm going to give you a few different things you can choose from, and then I'll go back. Don't worry if you're not sure right away. I'll go back and show you again at the end. So this is a bit what your farm might look like. So it's in 2 different fields. So you got 1 field, 2 field, and around the edges you've got your borders. These spaces you can use for planting seeds if you want, or I'm going to give you a couple of other things that you might want to put in around your borders instead. It's up to you. So you've got 2 fields and 4 borders, and you can choose to use them for different things. So here's your first 2 options for what you might want to buy with your €1,000. Okay, so here's our 2 different kinds of seeds. So the first type of seed you can buy are seeds from a big wheat company. So these cost €400 for each field. So if you decide you want to only buy these type of seeds, you can completely plant both of your fields for €800. These are wheat seeds. Okay, so remember we said at the beginning, wheat is one of the most popular things to eat around the world. Many countries are happy to buy in wheat, and people living in the country you're in are also happy to buy it. The company that sells them make sure that you will get it's made so that a large amount of wheat will grow from the seed that you're putting in. That's the priority. You can't save the seeds at the end of the year and plant them again yourself, though. So you'll have to buy them each year. So because they are owned by the company. They also sell a fertilizer that will help the wheat to grow, and we'll come back to that later. So they advise you if you're going to grow these seeds, you should also buy some fertilizer from them. And these type of seeds will be able to grow even if there is this common type of wheat disease So they are quite strong against this particular type of disease. So if it does come through your area, hopefully they will survive and you'll still have some seeds left or some wheat left at the end of the year. Okay, so that's option one, seeds from a large company. Your second choice of seed, so these are the only two types of seed you can buy this year, are a local seed mix. So these are the same price as the wheat seeds, €400 per field. So if you do both fields with the local seed mix, that will cost €800. So these are all seeds which have been grown in your local community for hundreds of years. They grow very well in your climate and in your soil. Then there is, like I said, there's many different types in this batch that you would buy. It includes different types of wheat, different types of beans, and different types of potato. So these will all be a bit more unusual types than the wheat. They might be more likely to be bought by people in your local area rather than sold to other countries. And because they are all different kinds, some of them are able to survive in drought, other might survive in storms with heavy downpours. So there's positive and negatives to both of these. So have a think, guys. Which of these are you gonna buy? Or you could do both. If you wanted to do one field with seeds from the wheat company, you can, and the others with the local seed mix, you can do that as well. So just write down now, what are you going to do? Are you going to buy the first option for both fields, the second option for both fields, or a mix of the two? So we can just scribble that down if you want now. I'm going to come back to that in the end. And we've got a few more things that you can also buy with your leftover money. So the most you'll have spent on seeds is €800. Okay. Go back to that at the end. If anyone has any questions, you can put them into the chat. So now we're going to talk about what you're going to do with your boundaries. So remember, there's 4 boundaries around the edge. If you want, you can just totally fill those boundaries with the seeds that you bought. So you'll have enough seeds to fill all of your boundaries. But if you would rather, you can choose either to do some pollinator friendly planting. So you can allow wildflowers to grow around your boundaries. This will help wildlife in your area. It might be nice homes for some birds that nest on the ground. It will attract bees, which might help pollinate some of your crops. But they do take up some space from your seeds, so you might earn a bit less money if you decide to let wildflowers grow. But it doesn't cost you anything to buy them, because you can just collect them from locally growing wildflowers, and they will naturally move in anyway. So you don't have to spend any money on those wildflowers. Or the other thing you could put in your boundary are trees. So you can decide to plant some native fruit and nut trees. It costs you €100 to plant each boundary, so quite a lot. So you could only, if you've spent all of your seed money, that's €800. You could only do 2 boundaries with trees. So you can choose to do that if you want. The fruit and nuts can be sold. So eventually you'll be able to sell these fruit and nuts, and they will grow back every single year. So once you begin to produce them, you will have extra food that you can sell or that you can eat. But they won't produce any for at least 2 years. So you have to wait a little while to be able to actually get anything from these trees. But they also provide lots of benefits to nature. They give homes and food to animals. They take in carbon dioxide. And they also will help your farm overall because they'll reduce the risk of flooding, and they're good for the soil. So in the long run, the trees might help you, but this year they will cost you money, and they won't provide you with any immediate money for about 2 years. And then I have one more thing and one more page with things that you guys can choose to spend your money on. So you can choose to add some fertilizer. So this costs €200 to cover a field. So you could really only do this on one field if you spent all of your seed money. The company that sells the wheat, they recommend you spread this, and it will help your crops to grow really big, and you'll have extra to sell. Adding a lot of fertilizer can have harmful effects on the soil and the rivers. So if you add too much, it can damage the surrounding environment. So that's something to think about. And then your last choice is to spray pesticides. So if you're worried about disease or pests, you can spray these. It costs €200 to spray each field. So again, you can't do both this and the fertilizer, only one of them. And it protects, the type of pesticide you can buy will protect you against 3 of the most common pests that might affect the wheat crop and some of the local seed mix. But the other problem for you to think about is it can be dangerous to use if you get it on your skin. So if you want, you can spend an extra €100 to buy a mask and a protective suit. Okay, so these are all of your choices. So I'm going to go back to the beginning to show you this picture. So again, this is what your farm looks like. Got 2 fields surrounded by 4 borders or boundaries, and you've got to choose what you're going to put in them that adds up to €1,000. You don't have to spend all the money if you don't want. You can keep it for something else. And your choices of how you're going to spend your €1,000 are seed from the wheat company, the local seed mix, wildflowers for free, native fruits and trees, fertilizer or pesticide. So hopefully everyone has just scribbled down what they're going to buy. And now what we're going to do is we're going to see what has actually gone on that year, because it's impossible to know in advance. Are you going to have good weather? Is there going to be any pests that come in? Is there going to be any disease sweeping through? So it all comes down to chance. So for this part of the game, I want you guys to now pick a number between 1 and 4 and write that down on your piece of paper. So I'm going to give you, there's going to be 4 different things that might have happened. So depending on what number you choose, that's what's going to happen to your farm. So hopefully everyone has written down a number. You can write down 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you, if you wrote down number 1, this is what happens on your farm that year. So this year, a new superbug strain of wheat fungus comes and it wipes out massive amounts of wheat that was sold by the large companies. So pesticides that were developed in the past are not able to stop this superbug strain of the wheat fungus. Because so much pesticide has been used in the past, that really strong type of fungus has come along. So areas that have got lots of different types of seeds in them end up doing the best. So if anybody had picked that they had both of their fields covered in that wheat from the large company, you probably don't have many crops left. Okay, so that's outcome 1. So if you picked number 2, this is what happened. Outcome 2, there's a huge increase in demand for wheat. Any farmers that are growing at least 1.5 hectares, so if you were growing 1.5, if 1.5 of your fields are growing wheat, you are given additional money by the government because they want more wheat to be grown, and you're able to sell lots and lots of your wheat for a high price. So if you planted one whole field with wheat from the large company, and if you planted your other field with the local crop mix, then you're going to do very well because there was some wheat in that crop mix as well. So you did well out of that if you were outcome 2. Next one we're going to do is outcome 3. So what's happened here? So outcome 3, a long drought hits during the growing peak. So during the summer, there is very little rain, and the wheat seeds from the large company are badly affected. They're not able to survive without any rain. Several of the local seed mix are able to survive because they have experienced this over the last 100 years, and they are used to growing with very little water, so they've become really strong in terms of being able to save their water. If you have planted a lot of trees around your field, that will also probably help, because the trees keep some of the water in the ground and make it more available. So if you planted trees, that would be a big benefit if you picked number 3. And then, number 4, our last outcome. We have a famous Instagram influencer come along, and they visit a local restaurant where they enjoy something made from the unusual local produce. So maybe it was some of those blue potatoes that they really enjoyed. And they make loads of video posts and Twitter posts about how delicious it was, which leads to an increase in demand and price for those types of vegetables grown from the local seed mix. So if you planted that local seed mix, it means you are going to do very well that year, because so many people want to buy your produce. So that was just to show you guys how random it can be about how well you might do. So have a think, did you have a successful year, depending on what number I picked at the end there? Do you think your farm would have had many crops to sell? And as well as that, did you do anything that will have long-term benefits for your farm? Or anything that will benefit the environment for a longer time? So maybe if you planted a lot of wheat and you ended up doing well with it, but you didn't add any trees or any wildflowers, next year you might not have as good of a year. But people that decided, oh yeah, I'm going to add some trees, I'm going to add some flowers, I'm going to plant some different things, maybe your soil will be better in the coming years, and you will end up, even though maybe you didn't have a very good year this year, you might in the future. So just to give you an idea, guys, of how tricky it can be, particularly for farmers in the global south, in countries where there's more and more droughts and very hot weather, it can be really tricky to decide what they're going to grow and how they're going to manage their farm and what they're going to put their money into each year. So that is the end of my presentation. Thanks a million for listening and for hopefully trying out the game.